Well, Shabbat Shalom, friends. This is Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat right before Purim. It is supposed to be a joyous time of anticipation, and it is. And the direct connection of reading about Amalek and King Agag in the Haftarah is to remind us that Haman, wicked Haman, who because of pride and ego and a deep-seated evil, who sought to destroy the Jewish people in post-exilic Persia, is a descendant, says the Megillah, of the Agagites. The Midrash suggests that King Agag, in the period of time between Saul's sparing of him and Samuel's killing of him, that he had time for conjugal visits in his state of incarceration. And in that little bit of time, continued to procreate. He probably already had children anyway, but the Midrash suggests that that reprieve of time was enough for him to put further offspring into the world, one of which would ultimately become Haman. So there is a direct genealogic link between the scripture we read today and the story of the Megillah that we will read in just a few evenings. I struggle myself with what it is we really ought to remember on this Shabbat. It seems antithetical to me to have a Shabbat where we remember bitterness, where we remember hatred, where we remember murderous intent, and our own, at times, necessary complicity in such acts. It doesn't feel like Shabbat to me. Of course, to state the painfully obvious, when we read the Deuteronomic account of the attack of the Amalekites, Moses adds some details that are not in the earlier version, where he reminds us that Amalek attacked from the rear guard, attacking those who were weak, who were young, who were elderly, who were disabled. That, we remind ourselves, is, as terrible as the attack from Amalek was, that was the worst part, that they exploited the weak and the vulnerable from behind, those who were fleeing, those who were exposed. And as we sit on this Shabbat, as the grotesque attack on Ukraine is in its third week, and we see the suffering of little ones and pets and elderly people uprooted from their nursing homes, confused and lost, it feels like Amalek yet again. But it is Shabbat, and we are so blessed to be in this space of Shabbat. And so I've been turning over and turning over in this terribly topsy-turvy time. We just feel emotionally booted from pillar to post. Emotionally pulverized was how somebody described the experience of COVID. I'm not sure what words we're going to have to find to describe now where we are at this point. But I so need to remember on this Shabbat Zachor, this Shabbat of remembrance, really what it is we are put here to do. What is it that we are gifted with the opportunity to do and to feel and to choose. And so I need to layer that onto our Shabbat Zachor, to give ourselves permission to remember what it is we are supposed to be here to do. And I've been hearing the word balance a lot, how to keep our balance in an imbalanced world, where it feels like it's spinning so fast, like a merry-go-round gone wild, and we're just holding on as it spins with our feet sticking out into the air, and it just feels like it's spinning from Leviticus, and we hear from Deuteronomy, and we're thinking ahead to the Megillah, so we're kind of all over the Tanakh. I was feeling fortunate and sort of kismet-like to come across a little teaching that actually puts us back to Genesis. So with your permission, I'm going to share it. This is a teaching from Rabbi Rami Shapiro, based on an old story about Rev Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. On his way to the Beit Midrash, to the house of study, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev saw a man racing across the market square. He ran so fast that his coattails and tzitzit were flapping behind him. In one hand, he clutched a tattered briefcase. The other hand was clamped on top of his hat to keep it from flying off his head. As the man ran past, Reb Levi Yitzchak called to him. The man stopped for a moment in deference to the Rebbe and greeted him between gulps of air. "Where are you running to so swiftly?" the Rebbe asked. "What do you mean, Rebbe?" the man said sharply, making no attempt to hide his displeasure at having to make this detour. "I'm earning my living, running after my livelihood. There are opportunities for success ahead of me, and if I don't race after them, they will escape me." "And how do you know," the Rebbe asked, "that these opportunities lie before you? Perhaps you are racing right by them. Or even worse, perhaps they are behind you, and you are running away from them." The man simply stared at the Rebbe uncomprehendingly. "Listen, my friend," Reb Levi Yitzchak said, "I am not saying you should not earn a living. I am only worried that in your obsession with making a living, you are missing out on the living." So I'm thinking today about how we remember to honor the gift of living. There is such an incessant busyness about the world in which we live, and I am well aware of a certain amount of choir preaching, forgive me, because the fact that you are all here means that you have elevated this time for sacred purpose. And for that, I am immeasurably grateful. But nonetheless, we live in such a saturated time. And it seems obvious, and yet I need reminding of it myself, that the feeling sometimes that we're only really doing if we are incredibly busy leads us down a path that is not so healthy. There is a business magazine called Fast Company, and its motto is a quote from Hunter Thompson: "Faster and faster until the thrill of speed overcomes the fear of death." I'm not sure that going faster and faster is the antidote to fear of death. And to live in such a time of fear and uncertainty, and let's face it, we're always in a time of uncertainty. We just maybe don't often feel it as acutely as we are feeling it right now. But our tradition comes to give us these moments of remembering, most especially here on the Shabbat before Purim, when we confront a story of our near genocide and live to tell the tale of it. But we're invited to slow down, to remember that living itself is a gift, to breathe. It's been a little while since we did our measured breathing, but I will recommend it so highly. I've been doing it a lot the last few weeks, to give away twice as much as I take in, to breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 8. It will drop your blood pressure as well as any medicine, so they tell me. Please practice that. It's so simple and so life-changing. We are supposed to slow down to the speed of life. And I really think that in places where the spring begins to bloom and the winter starts to dissipate, we don't really know from that here, but I imagine that when places where the buds come out and the pace of nature picks up so wildly that people must feel they have to come out of a kind of hibernation, and things just pick up, and suddenly it's Pesach and then Shavuos and then it's summer and then it's high holidays. Just to take a pause on this Shabbat Zachor. And as Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev reminds us, slow down to the speed of life. So what is that speed? I think it's slower than we might think it's supposed to be. And here is where I was just delighted by this reference back to Genesis. After Jacob has become Israel, after his nighttime wrestling with the man or the angel or himself or God or Esav, or with his nighttime wrestling, he meets his brother Esav. They have their reconciliation scene. And Jacob reveals what the speed of life really is. Genesis 33, verse 14. Esav invites Jacob to go with him on his conventional path. And Jacob says, "No, thank you, my brother. I will walk on gently, according to the pace of the cattle and the nursing calves and the gait of the children." I'll read it one more time. It's a verse that I will admit I have never paused to really consider. Instead, says Jacob, I will walk on gently, according to the pace of the cattle, the nursing calves, and the gait, the pace of the children. It's as if Jacob is saying, where we really need to be walking is at the back, with the animals and the children and the nurslings. The speed of life is the pace of the nursing and the nursed. Rabbi Yitzchak says, if we want to live well, we have to remember to live slowly, to go with the rhythms of the earth, and take our cue from those who walk at the back. So though on this Shabbat Zachor, it seems most clear that we are supposed to remember the brutality of Amalek and somehow blot it out, but I would instead invite us today to remember where it is that we too should be walking, to remember those that we should be protecting. And in so doing, remember how greatly that enriches us as well. May we walk with the children and the animals and with the beautiful pace of nature, volatile and unpredictable as it can be. But let us seek instead to walk with it rather than to dominate it, to add to the healing of the world rather than to its hurt. That, for me, is something that I hope to remember on this Shabbat Zachor. Shabbat Shalom.